and he knew that he had reached it. Never again would he sleep in his dining-room and wake with the light filtering through those curtains bought by Winifred at Nickens and Jarvey's with the money of James. Never again eat a devilled kidney at that rosewood table after a roll in the sheets and a hot bath. He took his note-case from his dress-coat pocket. £400 in 5s and 10s, the remainder of the proceeds of his half of Sleeve-links, sold last night, cash down to George Forsyte, who, having won over the race, had not conceived the sudden dislike to the animal which he himself now felt. The ballet was going to Buenos Aires the day after tomorrow, and he was going too. Full value for the pearls had not yet been received. He was only at the soup. He stole upstairs, not daring to have a bath or shave, besides the water would be cold. He changed his clothes and packed stealthily all he could. It was hard to leave so many shining boots, but one must sacrifice something. Then, carrying a valise in either hand, he stepped out onto the landing. The house was very quiet, that house where he had begotten his 4 children. It was a curious moment, this, outside the room of his wife, once admired, if not perhaps loved, who had called him the limit. He steeled himself with that phrase and tiptoed on, but the next door was harder to pass. It was the room his daughters slept in. Maud was at school, but Imogen would be lying there, and moisture came into Dartie's early morning eyes. She was the most like him of the 4, with her dark hair and her luscious brown glance. Just coming out, a pretty thing. He set down the 2 valises. This almost formal abdication of fatherhood hurt him. The morning light fell on a face which worked with real emotion. Nothing so false as penitence moved him, but genuine paternal feeling, and that melancholy of never again. He moistened his lips, and complete irresolution for a moment paralysed his legs in their check trousers. It was hard to be thus compelled to leave his home. "Damn it!" he muttered. "I never thought it would come to this." Noises above warned him that the maids were beginning to get up, and grasping his 2 valises, he tiptoed on downstairs. His cheeks were wet, and the knowledge of that was comforting, as though it guaranteed the genuineness of his sacrifice. He lingered a little in the rooms below, to pack all the cigars he had, some papers, a crush hat, a silver cigarette box, a Ruff's Guide. Then, mixing himself a stiff whisky and soda, and lighting a cigarette, he stood hesitating before a photograph of his 2 girls in a silver frame. It belonged to Winifred. Never mind, he thought, she can get another taken and I can't. He slipped it into the valise. Then, putting on his hat and overcoat, he took 2 others, his best Malacca cane, an umbrella, and opened the front door. Closing it softly behind him, he walked out, burdened as he had never been in all his life, and made his way round the corner to wait there for an early cab to come by. Thus had passed Montague Dartie, in the 45th year of his age, from the house which he had called his own. When Winifred came down and realised that he was not in the house, her first feeling was one of dull anger that he should thus elude the reproaches she had carefully prepared in those long wakeful hours. He had gone off to Newmarket or Brighton with that woman as likely as not. Disgusting! Forced to a complete reticence before Imogen and the servants, and aware that her father's nerves would never stand the disclosure, she had been unable to refrain from going to Timothy's that afternoon and pouring out the story of the pearls to Aunts Juley and Hester in utter confidence. It was only on the following morning that she noticed the disappearance of that photograph. What did it mean? Careful examination of her husband's relics prompted the thought that he had gone for good. As that conclusion hardened, she stood quite still in the middle of his dressing-room, with all the drawers pulled out, to try and realise what she was feeling. By no means easy. Though he was the limit, he was yet her property, and for the life of her she could not but feel the poorer. To be widowed, yet not widowed, at 42, with 4 children, made conspicuous, an object of commiseration, gone to the arms of a Spanish jade. Memories, feelings which she had thought quite dead, revived within her, painful, sullen, tenacious. Mechanically she closed drawer after drawer, went to her bed, lay on it, and buried her face in the pillows. She did not cry. What was the use of that? When she got off her bed to go down to lunch, she felt as if only one thing could do her good, and that was to have Val home. He, her eldest boy, who was to go to Oxford next month at James's expense, was at Littlehampton, taking his final gallops with his trainer for Smalls, as he would have phrased it, following his father's diction. She caused a telegram to be sent to him. "I must see about his clothes," she said to Imogen. "I can't have him going up to Oxford all anyhow. Those boys are so particular." "Val's got heaps of things," Imogen answered. "I know, but they want overhauling. I hope he'll come." "He'll come like a shot, Mother, but he'll probably skew his exam." "I can't help that," said Winifred. "I want him." With an innocent, shrewd look at her mother's face, Imogen kept silent. It was father, of course. Val did come like a shot at 6 o'clock. Imagine a cross between a Pickle and a Forsyte, and you have young Publius Valerius Dartie. A youth so named could hardly turn out otherwise. When he was born, Winifred, in the heyday of spirits and the craving for distinction, had determined that her children should have names such as no others had ever had. It was a mercy, she felt now, that she had not just named Imogen Thisbe. But it was to George Forsyte, always a wag, that Val's christening was due. It so happened that Dartie, dining with him a week after the birth of his son and heir, had mentioned this aspiration of Winifred's. "Call him Cato," said George. "It'll be damned piquant." He had just won a tenner on a horse of that name. "Cato?" Dartie had replied. They were a little on, as the phrase was, even in those days. "It's not a Christian name." "Hallo, you!" George called to a waiter in knee breeches. "Bring me the Encyclopaedia Brit from the library. Let us see." The waiter brought it. "Here you are," said George, pointing with his cigar. "Cato, Publius Valerius, by Virgil, out of Lydia. That's what you want. Publius Valerius is Christian enough." Dartie, on arriving home, had informed Winifred. She had been charmed. It was so chic. And Publius Valerius became the baby's name, though it afterwards transpired that they had got hold of the inferior Cato. In 1890, however, when little Publius was nearly 10, the word chic went out of fashion and sobriety came in. Winifred began to have doubts. They were confirmed by little Publius himself, who returned from his first term at school complaining that life was a burden to him. They called him Pubby. Winifred, a woman of real decision, promptly changed his school and his name to Val, the Publius being dropped, even as an initial. At 19 he was a limber, freckled youth, with a wide mouth, light eyes, long dark lashes, a rather charming smile, considerable knowledge of what he should not know, and no experience of what he ought to do. Few boys had more narrowly escaped being expelled, the engaging rascal. After kissing his mother and pinching Imogen, he ran upstairs 3 at a time and came down 4, dressed for dinner. He was awfully sorry, but his trainer, who had come up too, had asked him to dine at the Oxford and Cambridge. It wouldn't do to miss. The old chap would be hurt. Winifred let him go with an unhappy pride. She had wanted him at home, but it was very nice to know that his tutor was so fond of him. He went out with a wink at Imogen, saying, "I say, Mother, could I have 2 plovers' eggs when I come in? Cook's got some. They top up so jolly well. Oh, and look here, have you any money? I had to borrow a fiver from old Snobby." Winifred, looking at him with fond shrewdness, answered, "My dear, you are naughty about money, but you shouldn't pay him tonight anyway. You're his guest." How nice and slim he looked in his white waistcoat and his dark, thick lashes. "Oh, but we may go to the theatre, you see, Mother, and I think I ought to stand the tickets. He's always hard up, you know." Winifred produced a £5 note, saying, "Well, perhaps you'd better pay him, but you mustn't stand the tickets too." Val pocketed the fiver. "If I do, I can't," he said. "Good night, Mum." He went out with his head up and his hat cocked joyously, sniffing the air of Piccadilly like a young hound loosed into a covert. Jolly good biz, after that mouldy old slow hole down there. he found